was supposed to be Carney's big diplomatic victory, ended up exposing Canada's weakness again. That's why Carney's Berlin stunt looks less like leadership and more like a direct snub aimed at Trump.
Prime Minister Mark Carney says the federal government will be spending $500 billion on energy, port, and intelligence infrastructure in the near future.
Carney pushes Boeing contracts, Trump strikes back, and somehow Canada's military is in freefall. Sounds like a blockbuster headline, right? Except it's not a movie. It's Ottawa's latest attempt at looking powerful while tripping over its own shoelaces. And the best part? Trump barely had to lift a finger to make Carney's big moment implode.
So the cameras were rolling when Mark Carney tried to make history. He stood alongside Germany's chancellor. He unveiled what he called a new era of energy cooperation. Canada positioned itself as Europe's fresh alternative to American power.
Mark Carney walked into office with big promises. He was supposed to be the one who would finally bring bold leadership, spark an economic revival, and restore Canada's credibility on the global stage. His first real test came with a trip to Berlin, and Carney clearly thought this was his moment to prove himself. Standing next to Germany's new chancellor, he unveiled what he called a new era of cooperation. Critical minerals, liquefied natural gas, and long-term energy security were all packaged as proof that Canada could step forward without leaning on Trump's America. It sounded polished, it looked historic, and for a brief moment, Carney seemed to believe he had pulled off something monumental.
Didn't take long for that victory to collapse. He was doing his victory lap, but then he tripped towards the finish line. Within days, Germany hesitated. Markets shifted.
The problem was that victory lasted about as long as the press conference. Within days, Germany started hesitating, markets shifted, and the big announcement began to collapse almost instantly. What was supposed to be Canada's breakthrough turned into a harsh spotlight on the country's weaknesses. There were no functioning pipelines to move the product, no ready ports to handle exports, and no financing to back the promises. Carney had sold the world on a dream, but underneath it was the same old Canadian story of endless delays, lawsuits, and political red tape that has stalled every major energy project for decades. The setup that was meant to showcase strength ended up proving fragility instead.
Our government is in the process of unleashing $500 billion of investment in energy infrastructure, port infrastructure, particularly intelligence infrastructure as well, with AI.
Still, Carney was not ready to admit defeat. Instead of pulling back, he doubled down and tried to reframe the narrative, presenting Canada as Europe's big alternative to U.S. dominance in energy and security. His message sounded simple enough. America might be powerful, but Canada could be the reliable partner Europe really needed. To sell that vision, Carney leaned heavily on grand promises and eye-catching numbers. He spoke of nearly $500 billion in future spending, spread across ports, energy infrastructure, and even new artificial intelligence systems designed to modernize Canada's economic backbone.
A new port, effectively in Churchill, Manitoba, which would open up enormous LNG plus other opportunities and other East Coast ports for those critical metals and minerals.
He pitched the revival of Churchill, Manitoba as a hub for liquefied natural gas and critical minerals. He spoke about an expanded port of Montreal and new East Coast facilities that would transform Canada into a major supplier for Europe. It was presented as vision, as strategy, as a bold play to outmaneuver Trump and carve out a Canadian role on the global stage.
East Coast projects have been scrapped one after another. The shiny new facility in Kitimat, remember that one? It's designed for Asia, not Europe, and every pipeline needed to make this vision real is still caught in years of politics and lawsuits.
The reality was far less impressive. Canada's existing LNG projects were designed for Asia, not Europe, and the few East Coast proposals that had been floated were already collapsing one after another. Investors had walked away, governments stalled, and every pipeline that could make the exports possible was tied up in court battles. Carney was talking about Europe as though the infrastructure already existed, when in truth not a single port was ready, and not one major pipeline had broken ground. His plan leaned more on hypotheticals than on hard facts, and anyone watching closely could see it.
Trudeau once waved off the idea of LNG exports to Europe because the math isn't there.
What made it worse was how quickly the contradictions surfaced. Just a year earlier, Trudeau had dismissed the idea of LNG exports to Europe, saying the economics did not work. Now, Carney was claiming the exact opposite, as if the costs and logistics had changed overnight. Germany may have smiled politely on stage, but behind closed doors, they could do the math. Canada's promises were years away at best, and the risks were stacked higher than the rewards. The setup was supposed to show Carney as a global leader, but instead it exposed Canada's habit of making big announcements without ever delivering.
Trump had already done the heavy lifting. The United States isn't just a player in the LNG market, it's the leader. In the past 7 years, America has built up the largest export capacity in the world, with new facilities coming online that will boost output by another 50%.
Trump did not waste any time making it clear who controlled the global energy stage. While Carney was still busy pitching ideas about what Canada might eventually deliver, the United States was already sending tanker after tanker of liquefied natural gas into European ports.
American LNG is cheaper, faster, and backed by infrastructure already in place.
In just 7 years, America had managed to build the largest LNG export capacity in the world, with new facilities under construction that would soon boost output by another 50%. That was not just talk, it was a hard reality. Trump also had the receipts to prove his point. Years before Carney even stepped into office, Trump had already secured a massive deal with the European Union worth hundreds of billions of dollars, guaranteeing long-term access to American oil and gas. His message to Europe could not have been more blunt or more effective. The United States was the only reliable partner, and Canada simply could not deliver on its promises. That single line cut straight through the photo ops and political speeches, because Europe already had the evidence in front of them. U.S. tankers were docking, unloading, and keeping the lights on, while Canada was still drawing up plans on paper.
German industry leaders, the ones who actually have to keep factories running, they started raising questions about whether Canada could even supply what Carney promised.
The response in Europe showed just how fragile Carney's pitch really was. German industry leaders, the ones who actually need steady energy supplies to keep factories running, were quick to ask the obvious question. Could Canada even deliver what it promised? The numbers did not line up. Shipping LNG across the Atlantic is costly, and the infrastructure Canada needed simply did not exist. Every major East Coast project had either been canceled, stalled, or repurposed for Asian markets. Without functioning pipelines or export terminals, Canada's offer was nothing more than words on paper. The German press had a sharper description. They called the deal a handshake without muscle, a public relations moment without any real power behind it. Investors agreed and quickly downgraded the announcement to political theater. There were no ports, no financing, no realistic timeline, and certainly no reason for Europe to gamble on promises when the United States was already meeting their needs.
Trump, for his part, seized the moment. He reminded Europe that while politicians might get caught up in photo ops, markets respond to results, and he's a president of results.
This weakness gave Trump the perfect opening. He wasted no time framing Carney as a leader who talks big but delivers nothing. While Canada promised projects 5 or 10 years down the road, Trump pointed to the tankers, weapons, and deals the United States was delivering right now. Washington's military-industrial machine dwarfed anything Ottawa could even dream of. Every time Carney promised a future upgrade, it only underlined how dependent Canada still was on the United States. Trump seized that contrast to remind NATO that America was the one carrying the weight, while Canada was only there for the photo ops.
Germany is still buying from U.S. suppliers. Carney wanted to show Europe that they could do stuff, that Canada's a serious energy partner, and instead he reminded everybody why Canada has been shut out of the big leagues in the first place.
As the energy fiasco blended into the defense credibility gap, the dominoes started falling. European leaders who had briefly entertained Canada's LNG promises recalibrated back toward the United States. They saw no reason to gamble on projects that would take years when American supply lines were already steady and growing. Investors who had once been curious about Canada's energy and infrastructure push quietly pulled back, labeling the big announcements as empty politics rather than real opportunities.
So behind the polished press conference, there was no hard infrastructure, no clear financing, and not even a firm delivery date.
By the end, Carney's effort to stand tall against Trump backfired completely. What was meant to be a show of Canadian independence turned into a public unraveling of credibility. The energy promises exposed weak infrastructure. The Boeing contracts revealed a military that could not even maintain its current fleet. And the global stage that Carney hoped to dominate only reinforced Trump's central message. Results matter, talk does not. Canada tried to box out Trump, but in the process, it proved him right. The country was left humiliated, exposed as a partner that overpromises, underdelivers, and struggles to keep up. For Trump, it was the easiest win possible. For Canada, it was a reminder that credibility is earned by action, not announcements.
What was sold as independence from Trump's America First agenda quickly turned into a reminder of how dependent Canada really is.
Carney set out to prove Canada could rise as an independent power, but instead exposed just how fragile the country really is. The military is crumbling, the energy plans are empty, and allies are running back to Washington. In the end, Trump did not just win. Carney handed him the victory.